Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener, it's great to have you back, but if you're new, welcome to the show. In this insightful and thought-provoking series, we speak to business leaders and people who have had high levels of career success, but we also talk to up-and-coming and emerging business talent. We speak to such a variety of people all across the globe. We'll talk about success habits and what they do in order to ensure they stay at the top of their game. Listen and find out hints and tips to help you in the world of business. How do you set up your own company and make sure it's a success? We'll also talk about how to drive business growth and get your company noticed. Practical advice to help you in your career from those who have made it. In this episode, I'm joined by Terry Boyle McDougall from Chicago in the US. Terry was a long-time corporate marketing executive where she led teams, developed strategies, and advised senior leaders in how to drive business results. She is the author of Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. Terry, thanks for joining me on this episode.
Jason, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. So before we kind of get onto the books and what you do current day, talk to us about how it all kind of began for you and how you kind of evolved through your career, because obviously you've had an absolute mountain of experience, 30 years in marketing. Talk to us
Yeah,
about how it all kind of got started for you.
it's hard to believe that it's been that long. It doesn't feel like it. But I the first memory that I have of wanting to work in marketing or slash advertising was there used to be a television show on in the US called Bewitched. This was back in the 1960s, and I think when I was a kid I watched it on reruns. And the husband on the show, he was married to a witch, but the husband on the show worked for an advertising agency. And for whatever reason, that just stuck with me. And I thought, oh, that seems interesting because I was artistic, creative. So that kind of stuck with me. And then when I first got out of college, my boyfriend's mom gave me a book that's called What Color's Your Parachute? And she said, before you start interviewing for jobs, I want you to read this book and do all the exercises in the book. And really, the book is all about doing a little introspection to figure out what are you good at and what do you like to do. And the results of me doing those exercises were that I really should focus on something that was marketing, advertising, publishing related. And my first job was working in the ad sales department as an assistant to the salespeople that sold advertising. So that was really my foot in the door into the world of marketing, if you will. And
Mm.
once I was there, I felt like it was a really good fit. And I just continued to work in that field until I guess when I was 29, I went back to business school to get an MBA. And my motivation behind that was that I really wasn't moving up in my career as quickly as I wanted to. I was really ambitious and wasn't really sure how to crack the nut of like how to get to the next level. So I decided to get the
Mm.
MBA, and that definitely helped me. I got into financial services marketing when I got out of business school, and that was really when things took off for me. And actually worked in financial services marketing for 21 years before I left to start my own business.
And I guess marketing in itself, in the period you've kind of been in the industry, has changed loads in itself.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's really funny for me to think about that first job that I had coming out of college. I graduated from college in 1986, and I had to take a typing test. Even though I had a degree in economics, I had to take a typing test to get the job, and there was a typewriter at my desk. I typed the letters. I mean, just think about this, how antiquated this is. I typed letters on paper for the salespeople to put in envelopes and mail out to their clients. And thankfully, I was a pretty good typist, but every once in a while, I'd put the letter in front of the salesperson, and they'd come back and say, "Oh, you left a word out of the first line here," so I'd have to retype the whole darn letter. And a few months into that job, I got a PC. Thank goodness. It was like pre-Windows,
Oh,
like black screen with green type, and I had to like put in like little commands to bold and indent and all of that stuff. But it was such a blessing because I didn't have to retype. If I made a mistake, I just had to go in and correct the mistake instead of, trying to use whiteout or have to retype the whole letter. So, there's technology there. And then early in my career, working in magazine publishing back in the 80s, the way that they got subscribers was through direct mail. And
right.
I'd say probably the first 6 or 7 years of my career was really focused in direct mail marketing. And, that's used very rarely now. It's not like it used to be. Now, one of the things I will say is that the whole thought process and the developing a hypothesis about what you think will sell, and testing and learning and all of that, it's the same thing, it's the same concepts as what they use today in digital marketing. It's just that
Mm.
back in those days it might take a couple weeks to know whether your campaign worked or not. You'd have to wait for the
Yeah.
envelopes to come back, or the phone calls to come in to buy the product, versus now all the stuff happens in nanoseconds, right?
It's
They can
instant
be adapted.
gratification if it works
Yeah,
well.
it's different, it's very different, and certainly as time went on, it was important. I mean, it's funny, I can remember at my first job after business school, when we got a website. I mean, I worked for a big bank. We were like, oh, we're going to get a website. So in some ways I feel really privileged to have been there to witness history, because there's a lot of people today that um, can't imagine the world without a lot of the technological things that we deal with every day. But I was there to see that stuff develop in real time. Is really quite interesting.
Do you think that kind of companies these days, and how they were back then, do you think that there is kind of as do when you were back, sort of when you started this sort of 25, 30 years ago, was there the same importance or the same value that companies placed on marketing departments that they place now, or was it kind of seen as this is a supporting function of the sales department? Now marketing departments are in their, very much in their own right. So has it kind of changed in the value that people see? Do you think that companies place on a marketing department these days as it transitioned over a period of time?
Well, I mean, I think that even marketing departments now,
Mm,
depending on what the industry is and
yeah.
the structure of the company, I think that some marketing departments still struggle with getting a seat at the table. I mean, I
Right.
happen to believe that it's a critical function, and I think it's one that can be misunderstood by a lot of people. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, and I think a lot of people in marketing will agree that when you say the word marketing, that it can mean very different things to different people, and
Mm,
that can cause confusion and oftentimes undervaluing of the impact that marketing can have. But that said, I don't know, it's really hard to
pinpoint.
it's hard to compare,
Mhm,
to tell you
mm.
the truth.
Right.
um,
Okay.
yeah, and I mean, when I think back to working in publishing companies and how critical marketing was to their success, like, you know, direct mail was king. And, we had to be mailing all the time to be able to increase the subscriber base and to, get the renewals and all of that kind of stuff. So really marketing was at the heart. It was sort of the engine of the company besides the content that we were selling. So I think it was very much appreciated, but I have worked at places where, marketing was looked at as like the party planners or the people that made stuff look pretty.
Right.
And marketing is a lot more strategic than that. And I think it's very important for leadership to understand the power of marketing and to understand the breadth and the impact that marketing can have. But not everybody does.
And you mentioned, was it you were 29 years old when you decided that you wanted to take the
Yeah,
leap to
yeah.
working for yourself?
Yeah, it was a little
Okay.
bit, it took me a while to finally decide just to do it.
I was 29 when I started my own business, and I think it took me my 20s. I knew that I wanted to do it, but I didn't necessarily know what it was I wanted to do or how I wanted to do it. Was that kind of drive with you all throughout your 20s, and then suddenly it just all slotted into place, or how did that kind of manifest itself? This
Well,
transition to working for yourself.
well, I mean, I guess I could talk about the business school transition and then what happened later
Mm,
when I decided to go out on my own. I had decided I wanted to get an MBA right when I got out of undergrad. I decided I wanted to get an MBA, so I took like the entrance exams and everything. But then I started working, and I was making money, I was having fun, and just doing what you do in your 20s. But
yeah.
there was a point as I was in my late 20s that I was working for this company. I liked it, and I had growth opportunities there and everything, but a colleague of mine that I worked really closely with got married and moved away. And I think it really opened my eyes up to the fact that if I didn't do something different, then everything around me was going to change, just, slowly but surely, as happens in the world. And that I'd just still be sitting there and I probably wouldn't be very happy with it. And that just made me realize, like, okay, you've had this ambition in your back pocket for a
Mm.
while about going back to school, and maybe now's the time. And so, in some ways, sort of impulsively, because I didn't know how I was going to
Uh,
pay for it or anything,
yeah.
I called the actually University of Maryland that was close to where I was working at the time, and um, their their deadline for application was like 2 days away. And so I applied and I got in, and within a couple months I was there going to school full time, and somehow I figured out how to pay for it, and I was so happy that I did. It just was really like the sort of paradigm shift that I needed in my life. And when I got out, I was really able to take that next step up in my career. I was looked at more as a, true dyed in the wool marketing professional, and not just some sort of
Why
junior.
why was the MBA so important? Was it kind of that scene that hallmark of prestige, or was it kind of a
I think
what was the motivation for it?
it was a credentializing factor, I think,
Okay.
just from a marketing standpoint, because I had decent experience, but I'd been working in more of like the print production area of marketing. I did some graphic design, and
Mm.
I wasn't getting into sort of the strategic area of marketing. And I had been applying for jobs in that area, and I just wasn't getting any traction at all. And so it just told me I needed to do something different in order to make that transition to where I wanted to be. And so I just decided to go back to school, and certainly it did exactly what I hoped it would do. Um,
Did it give you more confidence as well when you was going out there and pitching for the work?
Yeah, I think so, because I think people look at you with more respect. They're kind of like, "Oh, okay, here's somebody who's
Mm.
been trained in all aspects of business." I mean,
Right.
in business school, you're studying everything, operations and, IT and finance and accounting and marketing, leadership. So I think they look and say, "Okay, well, here's somebody who really, is well-rounded in all of the different areas of marketing, or I mean of business." So I think that just helped me. I was looked at with more as more credentialed.
Okay. So talk to us about how that kind of business evolved and how you went into doing the coaching and how that all manifested itself.
Well, I mean, after I got out of business school, I worked for 21 years for two
I
banks.
know we're sort of
Um,
zooming through the years. I
Yeah,
do
we're zooming
appreciate.
through the years, yeah, and, it's funny because I never really thought that financial services would be an interesting career. Which is
Yeah.
funny because being an economics major, it would actually have made sense for me to go into that, out of undergrad, but it just seemed boring to me. But once, at this point, I was married, my husband and I wanted to buy a house, and so I got into financial services, and it actually was very, very interesting. And so I just learned a ton in that time. Really like
Oh,
observed how things operate in these big companies. Dealt with great leaders, crazy leaders, strange situations, mergers, acquisitions, just basically became experienced in those 21 years. And in the last place that I worked, in both, I worked at two companies, one for like 9 years and the other one for 12 years. And at each company, I probably had about 4 jobs at each company during that time. In my last company, the last job that I was placed into, like I was asked if I wanted this job, and I took it a little bit under duress. I wasn't sure I really wanted it, but I was kind of talked into taking it, and it really wasn't a great fit, to tell you the truth. I wasn't very happy in that role, but I'd been there for 12 years. I pretty much had done everything that I was interested in doing in the company. So I was sort of like fantasizing about leaving, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. It ended up that they went through this sort of restructuring that put me in a position to leave without having another job, that I was going to be
mm,
okay for a while. And so when I left, I just decided to take some time off, sort of like detox from the stress that I had experienced over those last couple of years, and really think about, what do I want to do? I kind of went back to that advice when I first got out of college about, what are you good at and what do you like to do?
yeah.
And as a leader, I had always spent a lot of time coaching and mentoring people on my staff, and that had helped me be successful. I mean, when you've got good people that know what their jobs are and feel confident and, come in and give their best every day, it only makes you look better as a leader. It only, because your
Mm.
people are achieving things. And so, I thought, "Oh, I think that would be interesting to become an executive coach." So I found a credentialing training program, and I went through that program to become a certified professional coach. At first, I thought I would get another job and just kind of do this on the side and use the skills in my new job. But as I was among my classmates, and many of whom were planning on starting their own businesses, I guess it was sort of contagious in a way. And I thought, well, why not? Why don't I just give this a shot? I can always go get another job, but I might not always be in a position to start my own business. And so
Mm.
that's kind of how it's going back to, I finished that training program in January of 2018. So it's been 3 years.
Oh wow! So
And
not very long in the grand scheme of things.
yeah, I had some clients while I was still in the training
Mm.
program, but yeah, it's been 3 years. I'm still going strong, and
Oh, fantastic.
I love it. I mean, it really it allows me to combine my deep interest in business problems. I mean, I love business. I love brainstorming about how to achieve
Mm.
goals, and I love thinking through sort of complex situations, and I like helping people. So being an executive and career coach, I get to combine those two interests.
How did you kind of build it all up then and start attracting clients? And I'm guessing finding people that had a good working relationship with. How did it all kind of, how did you start building that?
Well, to start with, it was just leveraging my own network.
Mm.
So, a lot of people in my network knew that I was going through the training program. And part of the training program requires you to get a certain number of hours coaching. So, in the beginning, I was
Right.
offering free coaching, because I needed it to become credentialed to
Yeah.
a certain number of people that were in my network. And, people enjoyed it. They started referring me to people. When I announced on LinkedIn that, I kind of changed my title from, I had been doing some marketing consulting when I first left my job before I became a coach. And when I changed it, I had people reach out and say, "Oh, you're doing coaching now? I was just thinking about getting a coach." Right. So a lot of my first
Ah,
clients were people that I just knew. One of my first clients was somebody that I met at my very first job. And we
wow.
had sort of stayed in touch over the years. And, again, she was kind of thinking like, "Oh, I've got something that I could really use some guidance on." She had a work situation. But that's part of what I've done. I've aligned myself with some affiliates, I guess you could say, that will actually send me clients. And I've been active on LinkedIn, and always be networking, out talking
Y-
with people, and done.
But it's about building brand you, isn't it? That's what's important,
Yeah,
and
it really is. It really is.
that's what you've encompassed over the years, and it's come back kind of around 360 for you, hasn't it? What you started with back
I'm
in many years ago, is now
Yes, I'm
uh,
very
yeah.
thankful, and I suppose I'm thankful to that 22-year-old for being a solid person, not being fake back way back when, because and in some ways I'm kind of surprised, but I suppose that when somebody knows your character, that they trust that, and I think that even though I've matured and I've learned and I've experienced a lot in those 30 something years, I'm
Mm.
still, at heart, the same person that I was, and I'm still have the same character, so I think people feel like, "Oh, I could
Mm.
trust."
And what have you have there kind of been similar things that have come up since you've been doing this coaching? I appreciate everyone is an individual, but do you tend to see sort of similar traits or themes with people, or similar problems that people tend to have since you've been, in the world of coaching?
Yeah, I do, I suppose actually, this is funny, like, among my coach friends, we'll talk about the fact that we often end up coaching people on stuff that we've had to surmount ourselves, and
Mm.
I was an ambitious person. I say that I work with high achieving people that are successful but not satisfied. And what I mean by that is they are successful on paper. When you look there, you're like, wow, they got a great title. They work for a good company. They're making a lot of money. And, you'd say, well, you're just clearly a success. But a lot of times when they come to me, what we discover is they're paying a high price for that success. So
Mm.
they're feeling stressed, they're feeling burnt out, they're feeling like they don't have a lot of choices. They might feel stuck, or they might even be experiencing health problems or relationship problems, right? Because they're so concerned with work.
Mm.
And I help people in two ways, to really get curious about, like, okay, why are you feeling like you need to pour so much into this without getting as much back in terms of
Yeah.
satisfaction? So sometimes, like, really examining what are the beliefs here, and then also helping people develop skills so that they can be more effective in their roles. And a lot of there are a couple of patterns that I've seen. One is that high achievers often are very concerned with external validation. And in many ways, this makes
Mm.
a lot of sense in terms of, if somebody's been successful in their lives, they've consistently been rewarded for meeting expectations. So in school, if they got marks, they were, oh, you did a great job. And maybe their parents made a big deal, or their teachers were giving them positive attention. Maybe they got into a more competitive university because they had good marks. So they're rewarded for this,
Yeah.
being concerned about what do other people expect of me. And then when they get into the workplace, that can serve them well too, right? Like, what does my boss want? Oh, I'm going to go above
Mm.
and beyond what my boss expects. And they get rewarded for that. But the flip side of what happens in that case is that they often will lose touch with what their desires are. And if you go back to thinking, of young children, initially young children do not want to sit down and do their homework, right? They're like, no, I want to go out and play.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, for a lot of high achievers, it does shift to, no, like, I get satisfaction out of doing this because I know I'm going to get a good mark on this paper or this lab report or whatever the assignment is
Mm.
from school.
Mm.
And when they get rewarded, they say, oh, okay, well, this is worth delaying gratification so that I get that reward. But when they're delaying that, they lose touch with what they really enjoy and what they like to do. And so therefore aren't focusing, they don't have the balance in their life about, I'm going to put a boundary here. I'm only going to work X number of hours a day, and I'm going to, turn off the phone, turn off the email. I'm going to go do things that I enjoy. And when people lose touch with that, things get out of balance. That's when people get stuck. That's when they get burnt out because they're not uh, relaxing and recharging their batteries so that
Mm.
you know their approach to work is sustainable.
It's
Um,
about a balance, and I think what you mentioned quite a few times there was you mentioned about success and how these people are successful, and it's I think you can look through the glass at someone and think oh, someone is successful, but success is a very kind of open-ended term, and it's open to interpretation. And what might look like success from the outside looking into someone else, does that person feel internally successful? When you're absolutely run down into the ground, is that success or is that not? That's,
mhm.
and I guess that's something that obviously have conversations with your clients about.
Exactly. I mean, we often will start off with, values assessment, like, what's
Mm.
important to you, right? Okay, well, if spending time with your family is important to you, and, you're working 12 hours a day, you're not really living up to what you
Mm.
say are your most important values. So sometimes when people really see it in that stark relief, that can be the motivator to say, okay, why am I doing this, and do I want to continue doing this? And sometimes people also tell themselves things that just aren't true. It might be that they say, oh, if I don't work this many hours, I'm going to get fired, or I won't get the promotion, or whatever. But I really try to, when I talked about helping people with skill development,
Mm.
sometimes people approach their jobs in a way that's under leveraged, meaning
Yeah.
that they've got resources at their disposal that they're not using as, that they're not leveraging to get the impact that they could get. And I worked with one client, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I guess, and she had recently been promoted from a team leader where she had 8 people under her to being the department head where she had 50 people in the department. And when she was the team leader, she was what I would call like a player coach, right? So
Yeah.
she kind of did the same job as the people that reported to her, but her job is to supervise them as well. And so if somebody was behind or they were out, she could jump in and do their job. And she did. Well, when she got promoted to being the head of a department of 50, she kept trying to manage that large department in the same way. And when we started
Mm.
working together, she said, I'm working 70 hours a week. I'm exhausted. I'm thinking about asking my boss to demote me back to my old role.
Oh no.
Don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I, of course, that's what I said. I was like, why would you do that? You know, if you've got
Yeah.
the
No.
capability to do this job, why not just learn some skills? And, you know, you were asking before
Yeah.
about some of the patterns that I see. This is actually a very common pattern where people get promoted and they don't mentally promote themselves. She
They're
was
still doing
basically
the thing from years ago. Yeah. Or
Yes. She
whatever.
was,
Mm.
and so we really looked at a lot of things that she needed to do differently. One of the things that was happening was, and I suppose this probably worked when she was doing it on a scale leading a team of 8, is that she believed very strongly in being like an approachable manager, and you know she
Mm.
believed in the open door policy. So her door was open all day long, and so she had a parade of people coming in constantly asking her to solve their problem. And that probably was doable when she had 8 people, but it's not doable when you have 50. And
Mm.
so
Yeah.
therefore, she never got her own work done. She was taking it home on the weekends. She didn't get to spend time with her family. So, you know, we just started with some simple things like, okay, I challenge you to close your door 2 hours a day and get your work done. And we had to deal with her beliefs and feelings about what that would say about her if she closed her door. But
Yeah. Yeah.
what we actually found out, which is really fascinating, but it makes sense, is that people figured out how to solve their own problems when her door
The
was closed.
default before was just let's just go and ask the question. Whereas if you're not available, you're made to think about it, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
She was becoming the path of least resistance when her door was open. But
Yeah.
when her door is closed, maybe they just worked a little harder to figure something out, or they asked a colleague. And one of the things that I really emphasized with her was think about how expensive your time is, and
Yeah.
think about whether you're
Mm.
investing your time the best way to get the biggest return on the investment for your company. You know, and does it make sense for you to be solving the problem of somebody who makes a fifth of what you make?
I think that's a really good listen, and it's a listen I've actually given to people in my own business, working out what they're worth. And sometimes you just don't think about that. We must move on to talking about your book because we're going to get to the end of this episode, and we haven't even talked about the book. So I must move the conversation on now. So you're the author of Winning the Game of Work: Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. What a big achievement to write a book. Tell us about this book, Terry.
Well, the book really came out of a blog that I started when I first left my corporate job. I just had a lot of
Mm,
thoughts. I was thinking back over lessons that I learned, and I just thought it would be good to just write. I like to write. I've been in marketing and I did a lot of writing as a marketer. But somewhere along the line, after I'd been blogging for a couple of years, somebody said, you probably have enough content for a book. So that got me thinking. And then I came across a book writing program. So I went ahead and decided to write a book about the lessons that I learned, coming
mm.
into the workplace. And I'll mention, I didn't say this earlier, but I'm a first generation college graduate. So there was nobody in my family that could tell me this is how you nurture and build a corporate career. My dad
Mm.
was the member of a labor union. My mom worked for the post office. They had these blue collar government type jobs, right, where you didn't have to figure out how to climb the corporate ladder. So I
Very
learned a lot
safe and
the hard way.
secure.
Yeah, they had these jobs. You just the
Mm.
union was going to go and negotiate the I'll just tell you this like quick little thing about when I was at my first job. I remember calling my dad and saying, "Dad, I really want a raise, and I don't know how to ask my boss for a raise." And he's like, "Well, I don't know how to help you because I've been in a labor union for my whole career, and they take care of that." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, Dad." I mean, I didn't have anybody
Yeah,
to guide me, so I
uh,
really,
you
um,
had to learn it yourself.
yeah, I had to learn it myself, and I feel like I was very lucky to have some good mentors along the way that sort of pulled back the curtain on, this is what's really going on. This is what really
Mm,
motivates people in the workplace, and that opened my eyes up to the fact that, I really wasn't, quote, unquote, "playing the game." the way that you really needed to win. In fact, I wasn't looking at it as a game. I just thought, oh, I'll just come in and
Mm,
work hard, keep my head down, keep my nose clean, and somebody will come along and just notice that I'm
yeah.
doing a good job. And, I learned as time went on that you have to build relationships. You have to get clear on, how you add value for companies. And I
Mm,
tell you,
mm,
there's really only three ways to add value in a for-profit company. You're helping them make money, save money, or reduce risk. And
yeah.
you really have to tie everything that you do to those three ways of adding value if you want to influence people to see you as valuable within the organization. And I certainly, when I was younger, thought like, oh, I'm just nice and people like me and I'm cooperative, and
Just not enough.
that's not enough. Like, how does that
Mm.
help them make money?
With the book, is it kind of aimed at anyone who wants to, because you sort of start a business, or is it kind of, working up the career ladder, being in employment, or is it kind of, it seems like it's got something in there for everyone.
Yeah, I think it does have something in there for everyone. There's sort of my stories and lessons that I learned,
Mm,
and what I learned from mentors and things I experienced too. But I also interviewed 11 people about their careers within the book, and
yeah.
I think that people talk about the mistakes they made and the lessons they learn. And some of the people are in corporate type careers, and some people are in entrepreneurial pursuits. There's at least a couple that started in corporate and left to start their own business. I wanted to interview those people because I thought that it would be really motivational and inspirational for people to read about
Mm,
other people's journeys. Because a lot of times, it can be very easy to look at people who are successful and say, oh, well, they must have just jumped on the escalator to success and they just, smoothly rode to the top of their profession. And that's
mm,
never how it happens. There
yeah.
were people told me stories of, getting fired multiple times, of sexual harassment, of, very strange situations that they lived through, but learned and were able to go on and do good things after sometimes these like kind of weird situations.
Even from doing this podcast, I don't think I've spoke to one successful person that hasn't been through trials and tribulations and challenges and knocks and bad health from overwork. I haven't had a person on this podcast who's successful that hasn't gone through some level of challenge. And that some of the stories have been, absolutely horrific. It sounds to me as well with the book, kind of, obviously you was employed, you worked your way up the ladder. It sounds to me it's almost like a journey of having been employed, worked your way up this corporate ladder to then almost finding your own feet and your own destiny. And it sounds like it's quite a nice transition how the book kind of leads you through that journey.
Yeah, and to me, I feel like I will refer my clients to various chapters a lot of times because it's really sort of about both the mindset shift that's required to focus your energy on more productive ways of working so that you're not like revving the engine. Or a lot of times I'll talk about, people moving through their career. It's almost like they're
Mm,
driving with their emergency brake on, right? That they're getting to where they need to go, but they're doing it in a really damaging way to themselves. Um,
right. Yeah.
um, so it's really like, okay, let's shift the mindset so that you can let that emergency brake off and you can flow more easily towards what you're doing. So it's shifting the mindset, but it's also there's a lot of very practical tips in how to do things. Like I mentioned this a little earlier about the leverage points. How are you really looking at what you need to have done in a clear way so that you're investing your time wisely, that
Mm.
you're not like concentrating on the wrong things. That, yeah, you can check those off your to-do list, but who cares if that's not having an impact on the business?
It sounds like such a fascinating read. I've got to read a copy. I've read a few pages, but it sounds fascinating. We're coming to the end of our time together. I could talk for ages, and I'd love to unpack this book in even more detail. But what would you say to what advice would you give to people who maybe are thinking, oh, I'm just not where I want to be in my career at the moment, or I want to start a business. I appreciate this is somewhat generic, but what advice would you give to someone that maybe wants to make a positive change that they're not feeling where they want to be right now?
I think that If you want to be satisfied with what you do for a living, the first thing to do is really to get in touch with what it is that you want. I see it very often that people they'll come to me and they'll say, "Well, I really want to do this," but immediately they'll start telling me all the reasons why they can't do it. And I say,
Yeah.
"Listen, stop right there. If you really want to do that, honor that, right? It doesn't mean that you need to start this very second, right? But honor that. Don't undermine it before this dream has a chance to sort of take root, right? Honor it.
Mm.
And then separately start thinking about, what do I need to do to make that happen? These are two
Mm.
separate things. Your dream lives on its own, and the separate thing is coming up with the game plan on how to get there. And I've seen some really miraculous things happen when people honor their desire. I've seen things happen like almost instantaneously. It's crazy. It's quite crazy. It's like, don't kill your baby. Like, let your baby live, and then separately figure out, how am I going to nurture my baby?
I think that's such great advice, and someone described it to me recently as like the editor in your head telling you all the negative reasons,
Yeah.
and shut that editor up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's such a nice way to end the show, Terry, and it's been lovely talking to you. Where can people go to if they want to connect with you, or they want to find out more about the book, or indeed purchase the book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon worldwide, and it is on Amazon UK.
Well, I wish you all the very best with your future endeavours and with the podcast as well. That was Terry McDougall from